The sky is about to break, and although countless starlights can still be seen above the sky, the bright moon has mostly sunk in the west, plunged into the boundless sea, and the seemingly endless ripples on the sea are rendered into it has a silver appearance. And in this endless silver ocean, there are thousands of them, as large as the south, north, east and west, and there are thousands of miles away, the island, which was so small that it could only allow a few seabirds to settle, was crawling like a monster, making the already gloomy sea even more serene. At this moment, on one of the islands, a large island not far from the mainland, a few melodious bells of dong 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 were suddenly heard, which suddenly added a little vigor to this deserted ocean. After the bell rang, the length and width were hundreds of miles away, surrounded by mountains on the edge, although there were hills in the middle, but most of them were large islands with fertile plains. A group of little novice monks in sackcloth robes came out. With this vision, and when I looked closely with the help of the rising sun, I found that the hill was actually carved by magic, with a huge and unparalleled body. And those little novices emerged from the belly button of the Buddha statue hidden in the vines and weeds, or carried wooden barrels or axes, and circled along the steep and impenetrable hem of the Buddha statue's clothes that could act as a staircase. And the next file jumped to the dark brown land. Among them, the little novice who landed first looked taller and stronger than his companions, with a fat head and big ears, looking like Zhou Zheng, and his eyebrows were filled with a kind of anger that was never seen in ordinary children. After landing, he let go of his hanging heart, secretly relieved, and draped the long-handled axe on his shoulders majestically on the ground and stood with his hands on his waist, waiting with a solemn expression on his face. When all the novices stood still in the forest in front of them and looked at him eagerly, the tall and strong novices coughed lightly and put their hands together in a pretentious manner. East, Maitreya. Brothers and sisters, today is still the same as yesterday. The practitioners who are ranked in the top 10 continue to teach the Fa, for the sake of progress. Before he could finish speaking, a fat, thin-skinned and tender-skinned man suddenly shouted dissatisfiedly among the group of little novices across from him, "Teach the Fa, talk about the Fa, you guys whose names contain more than one Shi, you talk about the Fa all day long. We let us do the hard work of fetching water, chopping wood, and everyone is raised by their parents. This junior brother seems to think that I'm doing things unfairly." Seeing someone openly disobeying his intentions, the tall and strong novice stared, and there seemed to be a ray of light in his pupils, and he looked in the direction of the voice, and at the same time he said coldly. Looking at his stern gaze, the little novice who was originally dissatisfied was like a frog stared at by a poisonous snake, his body froze completely, and his face turned pale. When a companion who was close to the little novice saw this scene, someone begged, "Senior brother Shi Yi, 97 has just come to the temple for only 10 days, and he has not worn away the wildness in the world. You were born with the mandate of heaven, even the masters said that I was the reincarnation of the great Buddhist monk. In the future, you must be the mainstay of the guardian sect of subduing demons, the mainstay of the glorious mountain gate, and your natural energy is extraordinary. The adults will spare him a lot." Hearing this compliment, that Shi Yi was as refreshed as he drank a bowl of ice fruit under the bright summer sun at noon, his frowning brows unwittingly stretched out, he nodded and said, "That's true. Reason. Then this time, I won't be too fussy with junior brother 97, okay?" He paused slightly when he said this. The rules of the mountain gate still need to be discussed. Those who refuse to obey the discipline of their senior brothers and speak falsely will always be punished slightly, and then they will be punished. As he said, Shi Yi glanced at the crowd, and settled on a thin, short figure. "You will be punished for 97 and 10 days from now. Help 33 do the chores." Hey, talking about the 33 years is also a shame. When I came here, I was already the oldest among the novice monks, but because of my lack of martial arts and dharma practice, I couldn't do the demon's roar when I encountered an enemy, and I couldn't shave. 97, if you help him practice more time now, it is equivalent to forging a good cause, which has never been a bad thing. That 97 is easy to get angry, but has a stern character. After a burst of anger was released, he was shocked by Shi Yi's displayed power, and he didn't even dare to renew his revenge. Instead, he lowered his head and squinted his eyes in hatred. Looking at 33, as if he was being humiliated by him, he spit out a yes word in his mouth. Not far away, he got a cheap 33 for no reason, but he was quite surprised. He folded his hands in a salute and said, "Mt mate Raya from the east, thank you brother Shi for your body." Hearing this, Shi Yuang saw Chow 33 with a slight smile as a response, and then he waved his hand and said, "Okay, everyone spread out, those who should be chanting and teaching the Dharma, and those who should be working, go to work, remember noon time. The reunion has to be paid for by work, so don't be lazy." The voice of his command came to the ground, and the little novices shouted in unison, "Yes, senior brother." They dispersed in a hurry, and after a while, only a dozen figures left in the crowd, looking at each other and smiling. Next to Shi Yi. The so-called speaking the Dharma is just a euphemism for the top 10 novice monks to exchange their cultivation experience with each other. Although everyone will have reservations, the stone from other mountains can attack jade, and the benefits of doing so are still great. It can be said that it is one of the important means for them to maintain their top position. It is absolutely impossible for ordinary novices to participate in it. Therefore, although 33 also had nothing to do, he did not gather around Shi Yi, but quietly walked away, pacing to a clear stream behind the Buddhist temple. Sitting down cross-legged on a gravel ground, he stretched out his hand to touch the cold running water, turned his head to look at a low hillside at the end of the current that was no more than a dozen meters above the ground, and then turned his head to look in the opposite direction at a few hundred meters away. The living water seeping out of the ground gathered and turned into the stream of the river. He breathed a long sigh of relief, formed a magic formula with his fingers, and thought silently in his heart, "How can you travel 1,000 miles without accumulating silicon?" Who would have thought that the source of a big river turned out to be a small pool with a radius of 10 paces? Speaking of which, these 9 words, "How can a step of accumulating silicon reach 1,000 miles?" really contain deep truth, and it can be regarded as the first famous saying that I have experienced in the dream world in the past few decades. While thinking, the seals in his hands kept changing, and the distracting thoughts that flashed in his heart gradually disappeared, and soon only the mountains, flowing water, secluded forests, sunrise, and other natural things remained in the 5 senses. This is the simplest, most upright, and peaceful method of meditation in Buddhism, which is not easy to make mistakes, wiping the lotus pedestal. And after wiping away the dust in his heart, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com 33 calmly took out a dark yellow shallow bowl from his clothes and began to rub it. This bowl looks simple and unpretentious. It seems to be made of jade, but it does not have the luster that precious and beautiful jade should have, and there are no carving patterns inside and outside. Same. But the strange thing is that when 33's eyes came into contact with the stone bowl, he felt a sudden pain in his brows. Like a snake, a belly like a mirage, scales like a fish, claws like an eagle, palms like a tiger, ears like an ox, the body is hundreds of feet long, the mane is flowing, and the ferocious dragon suddenly flew out of the water, swayed up, and rushed straight to the sky. At the same time, I saw a giant elephant covered with thick snow-white fur, fangs like a crescent moon in the sky, and thick limbs standing on the ground, running towards him from the distant mountains. If ordinary people saw this scene, they would have fainted from fright, but 33 let the dragon and elephant circle and run around as usual, and tried his best to visualize his posture and demeanor, and engraved it into his soul. Middle. Without secret recipes and methods to cooperate with cultivation, it is impossible to visualize any effect based on visual memory alone. But the strange thing is that in just one stick of incense, 33 has already seemed to have overtrained, with blood on his cheeks, and he withdrew from the realm of meditation with heavy breathing. The black dragon and white elephant in front of him disappeared in an instant. 33 was sweating profusely. With trembling arms, he put the bowl back into his arms. He let out a long sigh of relief and leaned forward. Suddenly I heard someone behind you asking leisurely, "Junior brother, what kind of supernatural power do you cultivate? How can you let the Liantai become dusty so quickly?" A thought flashed in 33's heart, has someone finally taken the bait? It's a pity that it's not even a shrimp, and it's not worth it at all. It's better. Looking at the direction, seeing that it was Shi Yi who opened his mouth, he said with a smile, "Little brother Yulu, the one who has been cultivating all the time is the most superficial Vajra power in the temple. I have encountered a barrier in the past few days, just now I was greedy for a shortcut, thinking of breaking through the cultivation method of using the lotus view and the Vajra power." Before he could finish speaking, Shi Yi smiled strangely, and said, "Really, that junior brother, you rubbed your hands in your hands when you were cultivating just now, and what was the object that you put into the front of your clothes after the lotus pedestal was dyed? Isn't it some kind of Buddha treasure that can help the breakthrough of the diamond power?" Senior brother is really joking. What a precious thing is a Buddha treasure, how can my little brother have virtue? 33 explained with a normal expression, "The thing just now was just a stone bowl that I polished, because my little brother's nature jumping off, always can't stand it. Recently, I finally realized the stupid method of using a grinding bowl, and I used external force to improve my mind and nourish my mind. Unexpectedly, I have developed the habit of taking out a stone bowl to rub it every time I meditate. There are other things." Hearing these words, Shi Yi smiled strangely, and said, "Then I will also see what this square stone bowl you polished looks like." While domineering, he directly stretched out his hand towards 33. 33 was slightly stunned, with a look of anger but helplessness on his face. He obediently took the stone bowl out of his arms and handed it to Shi Yi. "Senior brother, if you want to see it, look at it. If I hadn't made a dharma vow to grind this stone bowl and present it to the Buddha, even if it was given to you, it would be nothing." "Really?" Shi Yi agreed casually, took the stone bowl, carefully rubbed the delicate mirror-like surface of the bowl, lowered his head, and looked at it carefully for a long time, but found nothing unusual, and his brows unconsciously wrinkled. In the Buddhist temples on the island, the lowest level disciples are the novice monks. Because they have stepped into Buddhism with one foot, their mortal names can no longer be used. The name is determined by the quarterly examination. Those who rank among the top 10 in chanting, meditation, martial arts, etc. are named Shi'ai to Shishi, and the novices after the 10th are named directly by their rank, and the 11th are called 11 and 90. 9 is called 99. 33 is named 33, and his ranking in the novice test is naturally the 33rd. There is a huge gap with Shi Yi, who is ranked first. Originally, Shi Yi's domineering temperament wanted to take his things. "I will take it, and I will never care about the other." But it is completely different from punishing people for chopping firewood and carrying water for labor. It is a great hatred to prevent people from practicing. For a stone bowl that seems useless, to form such a deep grievance with the same family, even if Shi Yifei also felt that it was not worth it for being domineering again and again. When he was hesitating, he suddenly felt that the palm of his hand was empty, and the stone bowl in his hand was taken away by someone. Immediately afterwards, a pleasant male voice resembling a jade ball rolling on a jade plate rang in his ears. "This stone bowl looks simple and unpretentious, but it is as warm as jade when you start it, and it is a bit interesting." The person who spoke was a monk who was 8 feet tall, wearing a moon-white monk's robe and a big red cassock with embroidered gold, and with a face like a crown jade, with a detached and tranquil smile, suddenly appeared behind Shi Yi like a ghost. 33, who was sitting cross-legged by the stream, saw this person appear, his heart tightened, he swallowed secretly, and thought bitterly, "This is a big fish, but it's just too big," and jumped up in a hurry. The respectful hands clasped together and said, "East to Maitreya, the novice has seen the enlightened monk." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned his head dumbfounded and looked at the enlightened Shi Yi, who also came back to his senses, hurriedly bent down deeply, and saluted, "East Mate Raya, Shi Yi has seen Seng Zheng. Since your name is Shi, then you are the one who stands out among the novice monks," Shi Jiao said with a slight smile, "seeing that you follow your movements, you have a long breath, you should be practicing the supernatural power of Ji Zhang, but that's true. It's got some real flavor." The monk is complimenting him. Facing Shi Zhengyu, whose status in the temple was far higher than himself, Shi Yi didn't show the slightest arrogance and answered honestly. And Shi Zhengyu's attention was obviously not on him, he praised him casually, his eyes turned to 33, and he nodded in approval, "As for you, although Tianzi is not as good as Shi, but you can do it at a young age. It is even more rare to abide by the original intention and consciously make progress. Thinking that when I first set out on the path of cultivation, I was only a middle-aged person. Later, I was able to become the first monk step by step, and it was also because of the words consciousness and perseverance. That's all. Buddhism, talk about chance the most. I'm afraid there is a reason for you and I to meet today, so I'll give you a little bit of advice. The Fa does not teach the 6 ears, and come with me." Then turned around and walked towards the forest not far away. Under such circumstances, 33 could only answer with folded hands, "Yes." He bowed his head and followed Shi Jiao into the jungle. After he walked a dozen steps deep and shallow in the weeds and rhizomes, and his figure was completely covered by giant trees and vines, Shi Jiao suddenly turned his head and smiled brightly at 33, "Junior brother, desolate forest. It's dangerous, let me help you." After that, he jumped to his side as fast as a ghost, and gently supported 33's arms, as if carrying a large mass of cotton wool, and walked forward in the air. How dare the novice, dare to bear the title of junior brother of Seng Zheng? 33 still said tremblingly as he was dizzy and flying in the air. "You and I have a relationship with the same teacher, so you are naturally my junior brother." Hearing this, Shi Jiao smiled slightly and said softly, 33 secretly thought in his heart upon hearing this, "Are you coming?" But on the surface there was an expression of tongue-tied and unsure why. With a slight glance from the corner of his eyes, he stole a glimpse of his blank face. Shi Jiao breathed out his breath, his body sank, and he landed with 33 on a thick branch of a big tree in the sky. Holding the square stone bowl owned by 33 in the palm of his hand, Shi Jiao said with a smile, "Junior brother, do you know what this is?" Standing on a slippery branch more than 10 meters above the ground, 33's face was pale, and he staggered and replied, Seng Zheng don't want to joke, isn't this bowl a novice stone made by me? Junior brother's character is really tough, and you have to hide it from me at this time." Shi Jiao haha laughed and interrupted 33's words, "This bowl is obviously made from a human skull. Cheng, how did it turn into stone?" Hearing this, 33's heart tightened, sure enough, but his face showed extreme surprise, and he blurted out, human skull. "It is a human skull," the voice fell to the ground, and Shi Jiao said with a straight face, "But it is not the ceiling of a mortal. In ancient times, when the Buddha first established, my Buddhist teaching of Mahayana has not yet spread to the human world. No matter how virtuous and supernatural monks are, they are unwilling to overcome the sufferings of the world. After this generation achieves the right result, they often shed their shells in the barren mountains and wilds. After hundreds of decades, the flesh dissipates between the heavens and the earth, but the skull on the top of the skull is immortal and passed down to future generations. Later generations will find their burial place if they happen to get it, and get their robes, which is the successor of their mantle and mantle. There is such a thing." After hearing Shi Jiao's eloquent speech, 33 said with a stunned mouth, and Shi Jiao smiled slightly, "So, junior brother, don't hide it from me, tell me where you are from. Pick up this bone bowl." Under his gentle gaze, 33 looked pale and stammered, this, here," his body swayed even more, as if he was about to fall from the tree branch. Come down and smash into meat. Seeing his terrified appearance, Shi Zhengyu did not forcefully persecute him, but said in a more gentle manner, "Don't be afraid, junior brother, the Sumi Temple, pay attention to the sea and the mountains, and I don't shy away from disciples worshipping foreign teachers as apprentices. You got the bone bowl of the sages, and I found that you got the treasure because of your own predestined dharma, indicating that you and I are destined brothers and sisters. Buddhists are most concerned with cause and effect. Under such circumstances, how could I possibly harm you?" Shi Jiao is well aware of people's hearts, and his comfort can be said to be polite and disciplined, making 33's pale complexion gradually look much better. Although he is still silent, he is obviously no longer so afraid. Seeing that his words took effect, Shi Jiao smiled warmly and said, "Junior brother, if I'm so mad that I want to harm you without regard for cause and effect, why did I have to explain so much to you just now? If you want to know something, just use the thunder method. Could it be that your mouth can be tougher than those demons who are destined to live in the world?" Sensing the subtle change in his tone, 33 thought to himself, "First, move with emotion, understand with reason, and then apply both hard and soft. This enlightenment is wise and decisive, but it is also a person." However, hesitant color appeared, showing the appearance of inner struggle, quietly counted 10 numbers, thought for a while, "The fire is coming," said dryly, "Monk, no, senior brother, do you want to ask what?" Junior brother has figured it out, that's right. Hearing 33 persuaded by himself, Shi Zhengyu smiled complacently, and his tone returned to the gentleness just now. "Quickly tell senior brother, when and where did you pick up this piece?" "Bone bowl. Before the morning class on the 19th, because I didn't want to mix with other novice monks and grab firewood, I walked a little more in the forest. As a result, I picked up this bone bowl on the bank of a small river in the west of the temple." 33 replied softly. "Did you pick it up by the water?" Shi Jiao's eyes lit up. "That's right. Do you remember the specific place? Such an opportunity, naturally, I will never forget it." 33 replied in a soft voice, his face gradually returning to normal, and when his voice fell, Shi Jiao couldn't help saying hee, and laughed. Okay, then you said I'm leaving, let's go right now." He grabbed 33's arms and rose into the air again, disappearing into the jungle. Under the guidance of 33, the two walked in a big circle, avoiding the eyes and ears of many fellow students, and went around to the west of the Buddhist temple. On the way, Shi Zhengyu did not forget to continue to listen to the news with a smile. "Junior brother, you got this bone. What's wrong with the back of the bowl, and found it's extraordinary?" "Disciple, no, I had a strange dream the day I picked up this bone bowl," 33 said with a reminiscence expression. "In the dream, there was a Buddha sitting cross-legged in the dream. Clouds make people dizzy. As soon as the head is dizzy, people fall out of sleep, but they are in good spirits. After repeating a few times, I know that I must have picked up treasures, so I often take them out and play with them. I want to see if I can find other magical effects." "I see." When Shi Jiao heard this, he nodded and smiled, and he was speechless from then on. After that, the two spent a lot of time on a cup of tea, and finally came to a small river with fast-flowing water. When they reached the ground, 33's eyes were fixed on the water surface. After walking along the river for a while, he suddenly stopped and said with his fingers, "This is it, this is it." Following closely behind him, Shi Jiao, whose eyes were still not far from 33, heard the words, leaped, stood above the water, looked at 33, and confirmed with a solemn voice, "Is this here, you? Are you sure? The flow of the river is slowing down here, and the color of the pebbles has become lighter. There is a big maple tree with red leaves on each side of the bank. It's right here," 33 said firmly after hearing the words. Hearing what he said was well-founded, Shi Jiao nodded in satisfaction. Without saying much, he looked around, and after a long period of careful observation, suddenly the thumbs of both hands joined together, and then the index finger and little finger clasped together, forming a seal. Immediately, a winged white tiger tattooed on the back of his back turned into a virtual image of a beast, protruding from the skin, growing in size, and finally emerged from the clothes, turning from a virtual to a real winged tiger. By the river. Seeing a monster transforming beside him, 33 half-truths shuddered. Seeing his trembling look, Shichuo smiled lightly and said, "Junior brother, I'll go check the direction of the water. This place is not far from the border of the temple. In case of any danger, I'll leave this soul beast to protect it. You don't want to walk around." Then, with a flick of his cassock, he rose into the air and suspended in the middle of the river. The condescending volley stepped down the river, and disappeared after a while. Seeing this scene, 33 on the shore couldn't help but feel overjoyed, and thought to himself, "It's done, as long as he doesn't kill people now, he will probably save my life until he finds where the owner of the bone bowl is buried." Now, the big plan has come to fruition, clenching his fists involuntarily excitedly. At this time, Shi Zhengwu in the air immersed all his thoughts on investigating the direction of the water. Naturally, he didn't know that the 33 under his feet were like ants, and his heart changed. Looking at the dense forest in the distance, he smiled comfortably, turned and flew back to 33. "Master, senior brother, how's it going?" Looking at him landing, 33 seemed rather timid, and asked in a hesitant voice. "Junior brother, I already have some ideas about where the foreign teacher's cultivation place is. It's not too late. Let's go now," said shyly. "Well, let's go now, too, it's too hasty." 33 heard the words with a surprised expression. Chance, if the timing is missed, then there will still be Dharma." Shi Jiao folded his hands together, and played a meditation machine like a great monk. After that, he directly carried 33 on his back, took off into the air, and threw both of them into the air. In the jungle. Walking along the river for a long time, overlooking the ground, and seeing a faint mist rising slowly, Shi Zhengwu took out a pill the size of his little finger from his arms, and stuffed it into 33's mouth as if he had eyes on his back. "This is Brigade pill. Eating it can ward off savage miasma for 9 days. You should swallow it quickly, so as not to be poisoned." Hearing this, 33 hurriedly closed his saliva, swallowed the pill, and said in a hurry, "This is the way out of the barrier in the temple." Yet, Shi Jiao nodded his head with an unprecedented seriousness, and commanded, "The wilderness is full of dangers. From now on, if it's not necessary, don't talk too much to distract me." "Yes." 33 responded respectfully, and seemed to know the depths of it. Just after the words came out, there was a leafy tree under his feet, and a huge face made of vines suddenly appeared on the canopy. You read a book. www.uuganshu.com opened his big green mouth, and through the neck that turned into a curved branch, he slammed his probe and bit towards the 2 bald heads of Ling Kong's vein. Seeing that he was about to be swallowed by the tree monster, 33 was so stunned that he could not speak, but Shi Zhengwu frowned, made a look of anger and subdued demons, and softly shouted, "Good evil barrier!" His body rose out of thin air without any warning. Jiangsu, while avoiding the big mouth of the tree demon's blood pot, stretched out his right hand and struck down with a palm. In an instant, a golden swastika appeared in his palm, and a hum sounded, like the sound of a Zen sound breaking through the sky, causing the tree demon to tremble. After that, the tree demon was 7 or 8 feet tall, and in the thick trunk of the 2 people's arms, a raging flame burst out for no reason, and within a few breaths, it burned itself into a pile of ashes. Between turning his hands, after killing the monsters with the utmost simplicity, Shi Jiao couldn't help showing a bit of his true temperament, and there was no longer the warm and jade-like face of the eminent monk. He smiled coldly, and muttered to himself proudly, "Pearl of rice grains, and also shine." Then the movement method kept on breaking through the sky. Behind him, 33, who saw the power of Senggen's attack for the first time, changed his face slightly, and thought in his heart, this way of enlightenment is so powerful, the Buddha's seal can be photographed with a single palm. Demons, am I fishing, or am I clever enough to turn myself into bait and let the big fish eat it? It's a pity that at this moment, no matter what he thinks, the situation is like an arrow on the string, and he has to send it out. 33 crazy thoughts can only take a few breaths, so he wisely forced himself to calm down, put all the distracting thoughts behind, and think more carefully. Coping strategies. At this time, the mist that was rising from the ground unknowingly had risen into the air, filling the entire heaven and earth. The sky and the earth are dark yellow, the universe is prehistoric. According to ancient legends, when the universe was first born, it was like a round chicken, and everything was chaotic. After hundreds of millions of years, the great gods Pangu and Nuwa emerged from nothingness. Among them, Pangu's eyes were closed. 18,000 years later, he has grown into an unparalleled giant, punched the chaos, and actually broke the universe. Afterwards, the clear air rose and turned into the sky, and the turbid air descended into the continent. At this moment, because Pangu broke through the chaos, he was dying because of the chaos, and finally died of generosity. After death, the last breath he exhaled turned into the wind and clouds, the left eye becomes the sun, and the right eye becomes the moon, the limbs and the body have evolved into mountains and mountains on the vast land, blood turns into rivers, lakes, and seas, the tendons and muscles become fertile soil and cover the ground, hair becomes stars above the sky, the hair all over the body becomes flowers and trees, teeth, bones, and bone marrow turned into minerals, and sweat turned into dew and rain. After the formation of heaven and earth, Nuwa was heartbroken by the death of Pangu, hid in the ocean, and fell into a long sleep. After that, all things evolved, and life such as insects, beasts, birds, and sea creatures gradually came into being from good fortune, multiplied, and flooded between heaven and earth. After an unknown period of time, Nuwa woke up and stepped out of the sea. Seeing the luxuriant life in the world, she felt joy in her heart, so she took the appearance of herself and Pangu, kneaded clay, blew her breath to give life, and created a plaything, which is called a human being. At that time, the world is full of wild and fertile fields, and from time to time there will be chaotic miasma fog infiltrating from the depths of the earth. No matter what kind of life is disturbed by it, it will become bloodthirsty, aggressive, and cruel, or become lethargic. The goddess Nuwa did not want the life she created to lose its nature, so she created an Onal township with divine power and raised people in captivity. In that Onal township, fruit trees ripen in 10 days, and rice can be harvested in 10 days. Humans live naturally in peace and carefree. A splendid civilization that no other life has ever achieved. It is a pity that there is no happiness that can be enjoyed forever in the world. Although Nuwa is born with divine power, she always has a limited lifespan. In the end, it is difficult to escape the fate of death. Once she dies, the Onal township will collapse immediately after losing her protector. 10 billion people have been carefree since the birth of the species, peaceful and happy. Suddenly fell into a desperate situation like purgatory. The hunting and killing of ferocious beasts, birds of prey, demons transformed by psychic creatures, chaotic miasma, winter, insect pests, and other natural disasters. I don't know how many kinds of terrible causes are enough to cause the extinction of the human race. Fortunately, although human beings do not have the fangs and sharp teeth of beasts and the magical powers of demons, they also have their own unique advantages, that is, long-lasting wisdom and huge numbers. At the time of crisis, sages were born one after another. First, the sage Sheneng tasted 100 herbs to make poisonous miasma, a bear made 100 gold to make a killing weapon, and then there was the great sage Li Er who saw the natural operation of good fortune and created a mysterious art. Chi Yu learned the magic trick of demons and spirits and obtained witchcraft, and saw the unique breathing and slaughtering methods of beasts, and achieved the art of physical training, Syakake's bloodline of powerful monsters and beasts dissolves in human beings, and changes his life. There are various mysterious methods, and finally let the race stand on its heels in the wilderness before it perishes. After that, human beings continued to progress, and they created some wonderful spells and treasures to suppress the chaotic miasma fog. The rare ethnic group gradually relied on building cities to become huge again, and slowly spread. After that, they experienced countless times and endless twists and turns. Refinement has actually formed races of different skin colors, hair, and languages, creating a land of civilizations in the east, south, west, and north. At this time, 33 and Shijengwu lost the protection of Buddhist temple enchantment and were surrounded by chaotic miasma. If they hadn't taken the precious pills to prevent them, they would have lost their minds. But the human race always has an innate fear of the chaotic aura, smelling the eternal miasma at the nose, mixed with rotten wood and withered grass, saying whether it is fragrant or not smelling strange, even if it feels that there is no discomfort in Lingzi at this point. 33 couldn't help but fight a cold war. And felt the strange enlightenment of the child on his back, but at this moment he didn't care about it at all. He only devoted his energy to observing the movements around him, all the way along the river to slay monsters and beasts, and open up forests and paths until the sun sets and the sky is dark. He finally breathed a sigh of relief and landed on a flat boulder facing the water. In the wild, the night is 100 times more dangerous than the day. We will rest here tonight. Taking a deep breath, he gently placed 33 on the ground and said in a slightly hoarse voice. Then I'll go around to pick up some firewood to make a fire. 33 tried his best to move his stiff body when he heard the words, and said with a low brow. That's not necessary. Hearing this, Shichua shook his head, took out a brocade bag from his bosom, opened the yellow silk rope wrapped around the mouth of the bag, and found a crystal-clear glass lamp with a height of about a foot. After that, he lowered his head and opened his mouth to swallow a mouthful of the moist air in the forest. After his stomach bulged slightly, his Adam's apple moved and he drank, hui. At the same time, a slender line of fire spewed out of his mouth, swept over the lamp, and smashed the glass. The lamp was lit. Immediately, a fire was born out of nothingness, covering the 3-foot radius on the white rock by the river with a little warmth. Looking at the little flame on the wick, 33's face couldn't help showing admiration, and he blurted out, "This little bean-sized flame can produce such light and heat, what a treasure!" He placed the glazed lantern lightly on the white stone, and Shijiao said with a smile, "It's just a glazed lamp engraved with the bright mantra, and it's not even a treasure. It's just that the heaven nurtures all things and overcomes each other. No matter how ferocious and intractable beasts and monsters are, unless they are enlightened, they must be afraid of firelight. Walking in the wilderness at night with such a lamp is indeed much more convenient." Sitting cross-legged under the lamp. His words were understated, but he couldn't hide the smugness in his tone. 33 on the side heard it and hurriedly continued to compliment, "Donglei Maitreya, senior brother is too modest, the light mantra is the most difficult of my 8 Yon Buddhist mantras. One of the top 9 methods of cultivation is difficult for ordinary people to perform on their own, let alone engraved on objects. Your glazed cup is close to a magic weapon, why is it not a treasure?" With a smile on his face as he spoke, sitting cross-legged across from Shijengwu. "Junior brother, you look dumb, but you have a clever mouth." Hearing these words, a smile appeared on the corners of Shijiao's mouth. He took out a small pale blue jade bottle from his arms and threw it to San 13, "This bottle contains dewy pills soaked with blue lamp dew. 2 drops of dew water and a pill can make ordinary people feel hungry and thirsty all day and night, you can use it." UU reading www.yukansha.com. Yes. 33 respectfully clasped his hands together and answered, unplugging the cork of the jade bottle, sniffing the faint aroma of herbal medicine, raised his head and swallowed the pills and steamed dew, and suddenly felt his hungry stomach change. Much more comfortable. With a comfortable sigh of relief, he rubbed his stomach, and was about to compliment the enlightenment a few more words, but found that the Buddha on the opposite side had closed his eyes and fell into meditation, so he stopped talking and thought silently in his heart, "It's not enough to explain the consciousness of enlightenment, and after getting along for a long time, it can reveal a bit of human nature in a half-truth. But in the end, it is someone who has practiced, who ate my flattery, and was so complacent that he was able to control the ape for a while, but it was rare." He lay silently under the lamp and closed his eyes. Although the strange sound of rustling was heard from the surrounding dense forest, and every once in a while, there were high-pitched or low-pitched monster roars, but the 3-foot glazed light was still there. Like an impregnable wall, the guardian's she was enlightened, and the 33-eon night was peaceful. At dawn the next day, the two set off early and continued their unknown journey. In this way, 33 Fu climbed mountains and mountains behind Shizhengyu, and crossed rivers and rivers for more than 10 days. Yulu, who did not know how many monsters and beasts she met along the way, finally came to the foot of a towering mountain. At this moment, Shijiao's golden cassock was already dirty, and the moon-white monk's robe inside gave off an unpleasant stench. The whole person had changed from the posture of an eminent monk sitting on the altar in the wind, clear and bright moon, to a beggar-like one. And he was in this embarrassed appearance. 33 was naturally even more unbearable. The monk's robe that was simply wrapped directly around the body had long since turned into strands of dirty cloth, tied under the crotch to cover the shame. The upper body is directly naked, revealing numerous scars. Although the two of them were extremely embarrassed, their faces under the scorching hot sun showed a strange excitement, especially Shizhengyu, who looked up at the jagged rocks, the mountains that plunged straight into the sky, as well as the mountain tops and white clouds. Merging into one snow peak, the expression is completely different from the usual indifference, and the voice is slightly hoarse, and he continued, "Judging from the trend of the underground current, this mountain should be the origin of the water veins. Unsurprisingly, the place where the foreign teacher practiced is hidden in this mountain peak. The vicissitudes of life have been changing for thousands of years. From a small branch, following clues and horses to the source, it is not worth my 30 years of idle cultivation. Acupuncture's technique. Donglei Maitreya, senior brother, what a great way. Although we came here in twists and turns, but the distance between this mountain and Sumi Temple, I look at it, even if I go straight, I am afraid it will not be less than 200 miles away. How can a human skull be washed so far by the water? Really incredible." 33 said with pretentious amazement after hearing the words. Seeing that after all his hard work, the sweet harvest was just around the corner, so Shi Kaiwo-chan, who was out of his normal state, heard the words with a smile. The law of fate is mysterious, natural and mysterious, and it can't be explained by common sense in the world. The Kanduo Sutra has a cloud, the great thousand worlds, the 9,000 Dharma gates can be transparent, all things arise, and they come to the end. Beijing Mingwang Bodhisattva crossed the sea and ocean with a bone bowl. It took 14 years to find the Moke Monastery and learn the immeasurable Dharma. What is the journey of 300 or 400 miles? The ancient divine power method is already in front of you, you can come with me, ha 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 ha. He grabbed 33's wrist, flew into the air, and charged straight towards Xiao Han. After half a cup of tea, the two came to the mountainside, and suddenly there was a loud noise like thunder in the distance. 33 shook his body, turned his head and looked in the direction of the sound, and saw a continuous line in the distance. It seems that on the mountain range that intersects with the sky, more than a dozen peaks are spewing billowing black smoke, and there are faint flames inside. Countless winged insects that looked as tiny as mosquitoes could be seen faintly around, flying around those flickering smoke columns. At the same time, Shichwu volleyed to his feet and landed in front of a cave that was about 100 feet long and wide. Outside the cave is overgrown with weeds, and there are a few unknown small trees standing there. Looking in, except for a small section where the sun shines at the entrance of the cave, it is dark and unpredictable, and I don't know how many windings. Ordinary caves are no different. But after falling to the ground, he unknowingly threw 33 aside, rubbing against the lush little tree outside the cave that was not as tall as his shoulders, so excited that his body trembled slightly, but at this moment, Shi Zheng was ecstatic, and muttered to himself. He said, the Whispering Wood, is actually the Whispering Wood that one thought will last thousands of years, and one leaf will transform the world. After passing away for such a long time, the whirling tree will not die, it is not a Buddha standing on the ground, but also a rainbow transformed into a bodhisattva. Are you there? 33, who was standing behind Shijiao, heard this, and his heart was also a huge shock. When he looked at Shijiao's eyes that had always been submissive, there was a hint of sinister meaning, but it disappeared instantly, nodded. Baba opened his mouth and said, Senior brother, is this the place where foreign teachers practice? It should be here. Shijiao calmed down, spit out a long mouthful, and answered in a dry voice. After that, he seemed to want to reach out and put his hand into the hole, but suddenly stopped thoughtfully, turned his head to look at 33 road beside him. Junior brother, I teach karma and mystery, since you picked up the skull of a foreign teacher. Of course, you should get his mantle first. As he spoke, Shi Zhengyu took out the bone bowl that had been hidden in the brocade bag around his waist since he took it away on his own initiative, and solemnly returned it to 33's hands. Hole! Hearing this, 33 sneered in his heart and thought silently, being a pathfinder, that's why you kept me alive for so long. Wanting to find opportunities, but not willing to take any risks, such courage and decision, really deserve bad luck. On the surface, he hurriedly folded his hands to return the salute. If that's the case, then the younger brother will obey. Straightened the tattered monk clothes hanging on his body, tried his best to show a solemn gesture, and walked into the cave with his head held high. The virtuous and eminent monks in the ancient Sangha often have the supernatural powers of driving mountains and seas, and are proficient in causality. Although the prudent approach made 33 slander, in fact, it must not be wrong. Seeing the little novice in ragged clothes take a step first, he followed carefully and stepped into the cave. After a dozen steps forward, his eyes became pitch black, but his breathing did not feel stuffy. After walking for a while, the tunnel of the cave gradually sloped and began to go deep into the ground. Soon, a sparkling white light appeared strangely in the distance. When the two approached the light source, they saw that the cave suddenly became brighter. The ceiling of the cave was 2 or 3 zhang high, and it increased more than 10 times. The walls of the cave, which were separated by zangxue from the left and right, turned into a pool of water that was 100 zhang long and 100 zhang wide. Countless fat and boneless monster fish with translucent bodies and gleaming light were swimming in the pool. The reflected water surface was surging with waves, and dozens of narrow branches branched out around it, making people wonder how to choose. He stopped by the side of the lake. 33 looked at the magnificent scene in front of him, with a mouth-opening expression, looked back at Shi Zhengyu, and said indifferently, Senior brother, how should we go? Shi Zhengyu was already looking around carefully at this time, and seeing nothing out of the ordinary, he relaxed his tense spirit a little and replied softly, Junior brother, we have been traveling all the way since dawn, overcoming obstacles and thorns, and it's been 3 or 4 hours. There is no rest. Since there are many forks in the road ahead, and I can't choose for a while, it is better to just raise your spirits by this pool, clean your face and clean your body, and then make a careful choice, and start the road again. Etiquette. What senior brother said is very true. 33 heard this, and naturally had no objection. He responded with his hands clasped together, and then squatted down directly by the water pool. In his mouth, he muttered unintentionally, these fish are so strange. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com is boneless, and I don't know if they bite or not. Shi Zhou, who was on the side, also rushed to the lake in 3 or 2 steps, wanting to wash away the dust. Hearing 33's interesting words, he couldn't help laughing and relieved, and explained casually, although all kinds of creatures in the world are different, but in fact, all things are constantly evolving with the environment of the place where they multiply and live, because the fish in the ground cannot see the sun. So, while speaking, he was about to squat down when he suddenly saw a huge and incomparable dragon, born out of the void with an incomparably splendid and ferocious momentum without warning, and rushing towards him. Shichuo is profound in Chan and martial arts, and the Buddhist method is the most important thing about understanding the mind and seeing nature. Originally, it was extremely difficult to be disturbed by external things. In addition, he has been fighting hard for more than 10 days in a row, and his essence, qi, and spirit have already been consumed by most of it, and he is all supported by perseverance and delusion. At this moment, he is about to rest, and his will is the most relaxed moment, and he is suddenly bullied by a giant dragon. In an instant, his consciousness was captured, his eyes were split with fright, his whole body froze, his mouth was open to speak, and he could no longer speak. 33, who had been prepared, saw this scene, and quickly took out a grey spar the size of a pigeon egg from his crotch, and threw it into Shi Zhengu's mouth. At the same time, he bit his tongue hard, and spurted out a mouthful of fresh blood with all his strength, and the spray filled his face and mouth. But after doing these two actions in one breath, he plunged into the pool in front of him, and after a wave of waves, he disappeared without a trace. And at the moment when 33 entered the water, the spar he put into Shijuhu's mouth had melted into a turbid thick liquid along with the blood it spurted, and penetrated into Shijuhu's tongue. A shiver all over his body, he recovered from the horror of losing his soul. In the moment of waking up, Shi Zhengwu realized that he had just been attacked by chanting, and was captured by others. Instinctively, he first activated his whole body's true power, formed a seal with his hands, and summoned a mouthful of how tall a person was from the void. The heavy bronze statue of Buddha Bell covered his body. His response to strain can be described as quick, and the magical powers he exerted are also very mysterious, but the strange thing is that the bronze bell virtual image only appeared for a few short breaths, and then gradually collapsed and disappeared without a trace. My true power, true power. Every time something happened, Shi Zhengwu realized something was different in his body. He hurriedly held down half an inch below his navel and rubbed it lightly. He felt that his dantian was as hard as a rock, and his face changed drastically and blurted out, "Kitterning stone, why, how could this be?" His mind was empty for a while, his feet became unable to support the weight of his body, and he staggered back a few steps. However, he is a person with profound cultivation. He was in a desperate situation but not desperate. After a few breaths, he calmed down again. He quickly took off the brocade bag from his waist, swallowed all the antidote medicines, and followed his breath. With a straight face, neither humble nor arrogant hands clasped together, bowed deeply towards the empty cave, and said in a loud voice, "The little monk is in the lineage of the ancient great virtue Su Misheng, and he respects the future Buddha Maitreya. This time, it was a coincidence that I got the bone bowl of a certain ancient sage, and I came to find an opportunity. If I offended Zunka, please forgive me." The voice fell to the ground, there was no echo for a long time, and the antidote did not take effect. Shi Zhengu's face gradually turned pale, and thousands of thoughts flashed in his mind. Suddenly, he reached out and touched the blood on his face, tasted the bitter saliva in his mouth, and his heart rose. Come up with an idea that is impossible in common sense. With a stiff neck, he looked around and saw that 33 could not be seen anywhere. Because of the strange poison in his body, his tongue began to harden, and his voice trembled involuntarily and said, "Junior brother, could it be that you are joking with Brother Wei?" After I finished speaking, I waited for a while, and saw that there was still no response, and the true energy in my dantian had immediately condensed to the point of inoperability. Twist up. Between death and life, there is a great terror. There are only two kinds of people in the world who can take it lightly. One is the sages who understand life and death, second, they are stubborn and simple fools. Shi Zhengyu is neither a saint nor a fool. Inexplicably, the hard work of the half-year-old was destroyed, and the man fell from a state of ecstasy to a near death without warning. This huge gap finally stimulated him to go crazy, and suddenly he became mad. With the last remaining prestige, he slapped his palms aimlessly, and shouted indiscriminately, "What kind of character is he who dares to do but dare not be a person, since he first recites the law and then poisons me, how can he not dare to stand out?" Cursing, after venting for a while, the true energy in his body finally stagnated completely, all the joints in his body were as stiff as iron, he fell to the edge of the water pool, twitched lightly for a moment, his body could no longer move, only his eyes could barely turn. At this moment, a wave suddenly appeared in the center of the rippling water surface of the pool, and then 33's head came out strangely from the water. When he saw Shi Zhengyu lying prone on the ground, there was a hint of relaxation on his tense face, and the two looked at each other strangely for a while. 33 suddenly broke the silence, dipped the water under his feet, and said with a few heavy breaths, "The green ghost stone melts when it meets the blood of a person, and turns into a highly poisonous thing. The monks eat it, and the toxicity of half a cup of tea will rise to the level. Peak. If the monk is cultivated enough to survive these 180 breaths, the true power will not dissipate. Even if I hide again, I will definitely die. Fortunately, your true power is still a bit weak, and finally you have not survived this catastrophe." Became angry and stiff, so I felt at ease. Hearing this, even though Shi Jiao's body was as stiff as a rock, unable to move, his eyes seemed to be spitting out fire, shooting out incomparable hatred. 33 saw this, and there was no complacent expression on his face, but instead he let out a long sigh and said, "Seng Zheng, don't hate me. Ordinary people like you and me want to be transcendental and become a Buddha and become a patriarch. This is to go against the sky, not to make every effort to forge ahead, and to talk about cultivation. The Great Way is more important than life and death. You ask yourself, if you successfully get the mantle of the ancient great virtue this time, will you really be willing to share the opportunity with me? The tiger hurts people, so how can one blame the human being for the intention to harm the tiger?" The hatred in Shi Jiao's eyes stagnated after hearing this, and gradually dissipated, but there was still a strong look of unwillingness in his expression. 33 sighed after seeing it, and said warmly, "Seng Zheng, you have eaten and slept with me for more than 10 days, and treated me like a real father and brother, how could I have the heart to let you be a fool? In fact, I found the bone bowl 4 years ago. After obtaining the treasure, firstly, I often see dragons and elephants appearing in the void, and then I slowly visualize the appearance of the dragons and elephants, and I become able to direct them to the eyes of others with my thoughts. In this way, the second is to incarnate into various characters in dreams from time to time, and experience the way of reincarnation. Although I wake up and don't remember most of the things, I am also experienced in the world. Although I am young, I feel like an old monster who has lived for thousands of years. Bone bowls are the inheritance of ancient great virtues. I have known it for a long time, but I am small and weak, and I cannot find the place to practice great virtues on this wild island. Until recently, when I was chopping wood in the mountains by accident, I got the idea when I picked that green ghost stone." Hearing this, Shi Jiao finally realized that he had been caught in 33's poisonous schemes from the very beginning. Recalling all kinds of convincing that he only felt defeated, the unwillingness and resentment in his eyes disappeared, and there was only one last trace left in his heart. Confuse. 33 seems to be proficient in reading minds, and finally explained softly, "When I first saw the boneless fish in this pool, I noticed that they are amphibious. Except for outside the fish's gills, there are also hypertrophic alveoli in the transparent body. When I was invisible underwater just now, I breathed by biting through the alveoli of this boneless fish, and I worked hard for half a cup of tea in the depths of the pool." When the words landed, there was an inexplicable look of satisfaction on Shi Jiao's face, his body shook suddenly, and a continuous burst of turbid air was exhaled from his mouth, and his eyes gradually lost their vigor. Seeing that he was no longer breathing, 33 folded his hands from afar, proclaimed the Buddha's name, and respectfully saluted towards Shi Kaiwu and said, "Come to Maitreya from the east, respectfully send the monk back to the west, and enjoy bliss." After he finished speaking, he waited for a while, and suddenly he stripped off his tattered monk robe in the water, tore it into strips of cloth, tied it into a long rope, fastened a looper, and then threw the wet cloth rope out like a cow. Shishi realized half of his head and pulled his body into the pool little by little. Seeing that the corpse sank directly into the water, and not a single bubble emerged from the entire cup of tea, 33 finally breathed a sigh of relief and muttered to himself, "It seems that he is really dead. I don't know if I explained so much before Shi Zhengu's death, can I vent the resentment in his heart and avoid the trouble of entanglement of cause and effect?" Shao Ke had already pulled the corpse to his side, and began to search for the good things about Shi Zhengu's corpse. Goods. The Dharma king Sumuru, who created the line of the Sumuru temple, was a famous monk of great virtue in the middle and ancient times of Buddhism. Inherited. As the backbone of the younger generation of the Sumi temple, Shichuo is naturally quite valuable. The brocade bag tied around his waist is called mustard bag, which is based on the illusion that Sumi Dashin can be hidden in Meson in the Buddhist scriptures. It looks like it is only about a foot long, but it can actually hold the stuff of a whole small room. In addition, next to the mustard bag is another white cloth pocket named Rending bag, which is imitated by the future Buddha, Maitreya's well-known Buddha's treasure Ren pocket, which can put living things into it for years. Immortal, amazing. At this time, since Shijiao had returned to the west, the treasures left behind naturally belonged to 33. I saw that after he took off the mustard bag and the sack of human beings, he carefully searched and explained the body of the enlightenment. Seeing that there was nothing else, he let the body sink into the water, and climbed up to the shore naked. After that, tying the temporarily useless human sack around his neck, 33 sat on the wet mud floor by the pool, unsealed the mustard bag, and reached in. First, he took out a bottle of medicinal herbs and jade dew. Beside him, he took out another jade box, several Buddha treasures, many gold ingots, silver nuggets, and other sundries. Looking at all the gains, he fiddled with the Buddha treasure in front of him a few times. Seeing that he couldn't use it at all with his current strength, he muttered regretfully, "Whether we can escape this barren island in the future depends on the mantle and the Buddha treasures left by the ancient great virtue." He carefully put all the treasures back into the mustard bag. Afterwards, 33 picked up the gold and silver in his footsteps, and murmured, "According to legend, gold and silver in the world can be exchanged for all things. After escaping from the island, you must rely on them to live a good life." The gold ingots, silver nuggets, and other sundries were also returned to the mustard bag. At this time, only the glass bottle and jade box containing medicinal pills and jade dew were left by the pool. 33 opened the box, and saw that there was a booklet made of folded silk cloth inside. He picked it up and looked at it. On the cover was written the golden characters of the remnants of the 89 Xian Gong, and he couldn't help but blurt out, "It's actually the original art. Law." While speaking, he opened the silk book and flipped through it from beginning to end. He found that the recorded profound arts were very miraculous. They divided the human body into 8 parts: tendons, bones, skin, blood, marrow, viscera, brain, and body. Special exercises are tempered in 9 levels. Those who reach the peak have the power to drive mountains and seas physically, and the power to capture the sun and the moon. It is a pity that the remnants of Shi Zhengwu only recorded all the exercises on the first and second layers, the third layer only recorded the tempering techniques of tendons, bones, and skins, and the fourth layer only had the method of washing the marrow. All are lacking. 33 has become more intelligent than ordinary people since he obtained the bone bowl and often visualized dragons and elephants. He wrote down all the pictures and texts of the 8-9 mysterious art remnants in just one pass, so I regretted it for a while. Afterwards, the volume was returned to the jade box and placed in the mustard bag. Then he looked at a large number of glass bottles nearby, picked them up and opened them one by one. He picked out the Dewey pills, Kingdon glue and Brigitte pills that he knew, and fed the rest to Tanzong Gaiyu fish, to distinguish whether it is poisonous or not, and finally put all the non-toxic medicinal herbs and jade dew back in the mustard bag, and the poisonous things are buried deep underground. After doing all this, 33 carefully washed his body with the pool water, grabbed the mustard seed bag in one hand, and the bone bowl in the other, and said to himself, "People come and go naked, I'm naked now. Wouldn't it be more frank to pay homage to the great virtue?" According to the unspeakable guidance that had risen in his mind since he entered Shandong, he walked into a fork in the north of the lake. In the darkness, he walked along the downward for a whole day. He felt a hot and humid air coming, and he couldn't help drinking a few drops of green lamp dew to quench his thirst. Going forward again, the hot and humid air became heavier and heavier. 33 held on to his strength and tried his best to persevere. When he was about to be unable to support it, he finally saw a hazy red light floating in the distance, as if he had reached the end of the corridor. With his last strength, he gritted his teeth soaked all over, rushed to the place where the red light emerged, actually exited the cave, and saw an unbelievably magnificent sight breaking into his eyes. In the dense fog, a deep black stone road with a width of several feet and a length of several hundred feet is like a moat, separating a long underground river with no end in sight, and the boundless sea of fire formed by the underground magma. In the center of the stone road, on the crustal rock formation as high as thousands of feet, a deep crack reveals a ray of skylight, which is reflected on a side with a circumference of about 10 feet. It is naturally formed and looks like a blooming lotus. On the red crystal, it emits a little faint red light. Looking at the crystal red lotus from a distance, 33's eyes lit up, and he couldn't help chanting a verse from the Buddha. "Yesterday I happened to witness the Bodhi fruit, today I'm sitting on a red lotus in the fire." Stone Road. On one side was the gloomy and cold river, and on the other was the sea of scorching fire. He staggered forward in the mist, and it took him half an hour to finally come to the side of the red lotus. Unfortunately, he struggled to climb up the crystal. After searching for a while, he found that there were no corpses at all. Relics, monk clothes, cassocks. If it was someone else who would be extremely disappointed at this time, but 33 was not discouraged. He frowned, sat cross-legged on the red lotus, took out the green lamp and swallowed a few drops. Think about it. As soon as he entered meditation, he suddenly felt the sound of the river flowing in his ears, the sound of the steaming sea of fire, as if it had another meaning. A flash of light flashed in his heart, and 33 suddenly realized, the ancient great virtue, seeking great freedom, often use heaven and earth as a room. The sun and moon as lamps, mountains, lakes and seas as clothes. Is this robe and bowl? The bowl is your own skull, and the robe is probably the sea of fire, the river, the mountain wall, and other things on the ground. After guessing this joint, 33 breathed a long sigh of relief, rested for a while, swallowed a lot of chi-nourishing pills in one breath, then closed his eyes. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Put the bone bowl upside down on the ceiling, cover it, display the only meditation method that he knows, and wipe the lotus platform. He cut off the distracting thoughts one by one, and gradually a murmur of chanting scriptures sounded in his ear. The great Buddha Shakyamuni attained the true fruition and obtained all dharmas, and cultivated the 9 statues. 3 days of anger Mingwang Bodhisattva. These 7 figures are all human figures, and there are 2 other Dharma figures, called the Great Power Heavenly Dragon and the Wisdom Treasure. The name of the chanting Buddhist scripture is Dragon Elephant Fundamental Sutra, and if there is the word fundamental, it must be able to prove the great righteousness, and the inheritance of the great supernatural power is undoubtedly drunk. I don't know how long it took, but after he wrote down all the scriptures, he instinctively opened his eyes and saw that within the mountains, among the clouds and mists, a dragon and an elephant were soaring and running, the texture of the mountain wall left and right, boundless in front of him. The boundless river and the flowing waves of the volcano have all turned into mysterious seals, falling into the eyes bit by bit. Without thinking and ignorance, the 33 hands joined together, and began to imitate those Dharma seals involuntarily to form mudra. Seeing that he passed on to the great virtue and Dharma tradition very smoothly, he did not expect that he had just made a few handprints. 33, who could have been considered quite fat, lost weight at a speed visible to the naked eye, and soon bulged. The cheekbones are high and the cheekbones have become skinny. This is actually not surprising. The Buddhist practice has always placed emphasis on the soul and neglected the physical body. This is especially true of the ancient traditions. Therefore, the most widely circulated verse in the world is, "The physical body is a stinky sack, and it is a raft for crossing the sea of suffering." In addition, 33's foundation of Chan and martial arts is too shallow, and his physique is only slightly stronger than that of ordinary people. Even if he swallows medicine and replenishes qi, it is impossible to cultivate into the profound method of Dragon Elephant Fundamental Sutra in one fell swoop. In fact, it is absolutely impossible to make a mistake by sacrificing the flesh as a means to achieve positive results. After all, the great monks have become transcendental and refined after thorough cultivation, and have great freedom and supernatural powers. But 33's situation at this time is completely different. The Dragon Elephant Root Sutra is mysterious and unpredictable, and it is impossible for him to immediately attain the true fruit of Buddhism after mastering it. If the foundation of the body is damaged because of this, the only outcome on this barren island is death and reincarnation. Seeing that this catastrophe was inevitable, fortunately at this critical juncture, because of the great pain caused by excessive physical consumption, 33 woke up from the unconscious Dharma practice. Sitting cross-legged on the lotus pedestal, he gasped for a few breaths of incomparable weakness. After a second thought, he understood the situation at this time, and countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Inheriting the mantle of ancient great virtue really isn't that simple. Right now, my physical body is empty. If I want to continue my cultivation, I can only rely on the medicinal pills left by Shi Zhengwu to support me. A misfortune may deplete my vitality. The safest way is to temper my physical body first, and wait until my body transforms. Inherit the scriptures. And if you go this route, it happens that the 8-9 mysterious art in the mustard bag jade box is the treasure of body training. Although it is only a fragment, it is enough to use. But no matter how good the method is, the more difficult it is to cultivate. With my aptitude, if I want to be successful in body refinement, I have to spend at least a few years in this cave. Although there is an ancient enchantment of great virtue here, hundreds of evils are not invading, and you can live on the boneless fish raw, but it is also comfortable. But Shi Zhengwu is a coquettish character of the younger generation of Degzumi Temple, and it is impossible for thousands of people to disappear. No one cares about the day. And once this happens, I'm afraid I'll. Thinking of this, 33 gritted his teeth, his eyes showed a look of determination. He took out a few glass bottles from the mustard bag, and sorted out the medicines in them. She swallowed in one breath, cut off her thoughts again, and fell into the realm of teaching the Dharma. Time passed slowly, and he didn't know how much he was in a hurry, and he didn't know how many times he had awakened painfully from meditation, swallowed the pills, and continued to practice the practice of forming seals. Finally, he stood on the bones of the 33 shape and put hundreds of bottles of elixir in the mustard bag. When the medicine, rain, and dew were swallowed up, the 5 fingers of both hands crossed, forming the last seal in the Dragon Elephant Root Sutra. Immediately, the giant dragons and treasure elephants soaring and running in the mountains collided in the air, merged, turned into a colorful cyclone, fell from the sky, smashed the bone bowl upside down on his head, and empowered him to enter the 33 in the head. After that, it ran around the body 9 times, and after scouring the last bit of essence in the flesh, the color condensed and evolved into a baby's fist-sized egg, which seemed to be empty and real, and was hidden in the zenith cover. At this time, 33's spirits were exhausted, and his body was even more jagged like a skeleton wrapped in human skin. His eyes were dead, and his face was ashes as he sat on the red lotus, motionless like a stone statue. I don't know how long it took, an unbelievably powerful force suddenly emerged from the depths of the ground, and the entire mountain shook violently. After a while, thousands of cracks appeared on the stone wall, and countless rubble fell like raindrops, smashing into the sea of flames and rivers that were churning more and more violently, causing countless waves. The natural disaster suddenly appeared. At the moment when his life was hanging, he seemed to be dominated by people's instinct to seek auspiciousness and avoid harm. 33 staggered like a zombie and stood up, staggered away from the red lotus throne, and faced the falling stone above his head. Letting the magma and flowing water roar under his feet, he walked step by step into the cave at the end of the rock road. The corridor was dark and shaking, his face was expressionless, his expression was sluggish, and his footsteps staggered slowly forward, but miraculously he took a single step without making a mistake. He fell, and it took 4 or 5 hours to walk out safely. The cave. And just as 33 stepped out of the cave collapsed without a trace with a continuous loud noise, and the entire mountain became shorter. A few small trees in front of the cave also withered silently into a pile of rotten wood, and dissipated between heaven and earth with the wind. The huge impact from the landslide and the ground fissure slammed into 33's back, causing him to soar into the air like a piece of paper blown by a hurricane, flying 7 or 8 feet away, rolling straight from the mountainside to the foot of the mountain. Even if he is a warrior, this fall will probably cost him half his life, but after landing only a dozen breaths, 33 is like nothing happened, and he slowly climbed up from the ground, staggering. He continued to move forward and walked towards a dense jungle that stretched as far as the eye could see. At this time, the moon is full and the sky is full, and the time when monsters and beasts are common. As 33 slowly approached the forest, a group of hungry wolves with dull grey hair, uneven fangs, flat belly and gluttonous mouths, just jumped out of the forest, stepping on the bright moonlight. Rushing towards him. Seeing that a tragedy was about to happen, but half a moment later, when the two met, the wolves actually regarded 33 as a lifeless ghost, and passed by without interest, letting him stagger along. Entering the jungle, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com disappeared without a trace. After that, there were no Jiazi in the mountains, the years did not know the year, and the time of more than 40 days passed quietly. In the middle of the night, the sky was covered with dark clouds, covering the sky and the moon, the ground was raining heavily, and the mud and rocks were flowing. Thousands of people and horses riding a team of huge ships quietly boarded a natural harbor on the island. After landing, there were hundreds of wise men in this group of people. They seemed to have an invisible shield on their bodies and slowly rose into the air. Agile in less than half a cup of tea, silently listed the battle formation. Leading the troops in the front of the army was a general who wore a unicorn black and gold armor, held a 7-foot tiger slashing sword, and had 5 long beards on his chin. In the storm, he looked up at the cultivator in the sky, and then looked at his subordinates who were ready to go, and said with the power of destiny, "Xianchong Kingxiu, the army has formed, you can cast spells. In that case, please wait for a while." The head of the cultivators in the air had a face like a crown of jade, and the Taoist priest with a romantic face heard this, he smiled slightly, and the condescending general bowed his head to the general. Afterwards, he turned his head and looked at some of his classmates with profound cultivation techniques, and said in a loud voice, "Junior and junior brothers, cut down the Daoist thugs and the Dharma lineage, and it's at this moment that I am proud of my mountain sect. Please help me." The voice fell, Kingxiu stretched out his index finger, pressed his eyebrows, and instantly saw a picture of plains, hills and rivers that gave a feeling of vastness, although it looked as small as a grain of rice, in his exposed face. Emerged from the neck. At the same time, a virtual image of a Taiwan seal with the words Feng Feng Qing Ning sacrifice wine written on the bottom of one side sprayed out from the top of King Xu's head, and after the wind and rain solidified into a big blue gold seal, he was caught in his hand. Such an eye-catching method, even if its power has not yet been displayed, it is already very mysterious in terms of appearance. The few young Taoists behind King Xu who are at the end of the monk team, see that the seniors of the master are profound in Taoism and forbearance. One by one showed a proud expression. One of them looked the youngest, with red lips and white teeth. The elegant and gentle junior pointed at the golden seal in King Xu's hand in the distance. This Qing Ning sacrificial wine seal really deserves to be my view of mountains and rivers, the top 10 inheritances. The name of the treasure. Hearing this, the surrounding classmates all showed their approval, and they didn't care about being on the battlefield. They said, "That's it, the land of Qing Ning is fertile for thousands of miles, with both the dangers of mountains and rivers, and the benefits of rivers." As the food for my practice of the fundamental method of viewing mountains and rivers, it is simply a choice made in heaven. My view of mountains and rivers has lasted 58,000 years since the great sage Kun Kunzi opened the mountain gate in the Middle Ages. How many talented people have been around for a while, but only 10 treasures of inheritance have been left. How could it be a false name? Although the treasure is good, it only needs the master's high mana to show its brilliance. Except for the ancestors who lived in seclusion and cultivating in the mountain gate, I am afraid that it is the Uncle King Xu who can make this treasure seal see its true color. The more they talked, the more joyful they became, when suddenly they heard a short and stout man beside him, with a messy beard and round eyes like copper bells. Although the sacrificial wine seal is good, it is always the legacy of the ancestors of the mountain gate. It's not as good as Qing Gang Yun's uncle, who was born with natural growth, a natural treasure of edict, and has infinite potential. This sentence implicitly involved the dispute over the inheritance of the mountain and river view, which immediately made the surrounding become dumb, and the Qing Gang Yun that the fat Taoist was referring to was a tall and burly Taoist priest. He recited the mantra and blessed a method seal held in his right palm. His ink pads are different, the texture is not gold, not stone, not wood, not jade. There are patterns of wind, clouds, sun, and moon flowing in the dark, and the colors of mountains, rivers, lakes, and seas are densely covered on the outside. From the outside, it is neither square, nor round like a column, but round on the top and square on the bottom, which coincides with the ideal of a round place at the beginning of Pangu's opening of the sky. After receiving the blessing of the master, a black and white blue smoke gradually appeared on the seal, followed by a low voice from Qing Gang Yun, Shen, together with the seals of other surrounding mountains and rivers. The heavy rain fell straight onto the beach and melted into the sand. After that, an invisible wave rippled from the place where those methods were imprinted, and didn't exhaust until 100 miles away. Qing Su, who was suspended in the air, sensed the power of the seal, and smiled contentedly. The war general facing the ground bowed his head again, pointed to the beach under his feet, and said, "General, the general trend is here. From this beach as the starting point, more than 100 miles of mountains, rivers, and seas in all directions have been temporarily transformed from barbaric and wild to sweet land. Soldiers can fight with confidence without worrying about miasma, and the enchantment of the evil temple has also become invalid. All the geographical advantages here belong to me. I have Lao Xian." Hearing this, the general clasped his fists and replied, then turned his head to look at the captains around him, and whispered, "These Taoists, monks, alchemists, and priests are all people, don't look at them. They looked like they had low eyebrows and pleasing to the eyes, but they were all madmen who refused to obey Wanghua and listened to edicts but not propaganda. If it wasn't for the will of Emperor Chu this time, and it was to kill the cultists, they probably wouldn't appear at all. When we go to war for a while, we must not expect them to fight with all our strength. The most important thing is to rely on our own strength to overcome difficulties and defend the country and the people. My subordinates understand." Hearing the commander's command, the generals who were standing upright in the rainstorm as a ruler, responded in unison. The general saw the sturdy aura displayed by his subordinates, and grinned with satisfaction. Since you are waiting to step back, after 20 breaths, you will move forward and march towards the Daegzumi temple. After waiting for a while, he personally lead the army and embark on the journey of war. The coast is only a few miles away from Daegzumi temple. Even if the wind and rain are difficult, it can't stop the well-trained army, not to mention those cultivators who fly in the air and ignore the storm. With just 2 or 3 cups of tea, the leader sneaked onto a wet landslide in front of Foshan. Seeing that there was no obstruction along the way, the leading general stopped, wiped the rain on his face, and couldn't help muttering to himself, "These Taoist priests in the view of mountains and rivers really have some means." At that time, in the firewood room of Daegzumi temple, a blind old monk lying on the firewood was applauding joyfully in the dark and whispering, "Come, come, the introduction is here, wonderful, wonderful." At the same time that the general stopped, the thousands of soldiers and horses rushing behind him also hurriedly stopped. After that, without taking a breath, under the command of the captain, regiment head and team officer, Yu read www.yuyuganshu.com spread out the formations according to the arms, or rode crossbow guns, or drew knives and guns, and prepared for long-range attacks and melee battles. Waiting for all preparations to be completed, the general narrowed his eyes slightly, raised his head and shouted sharply at the cultivators flying in the air, "You cultivators, since ancient times, it is difficult for righteousness and evil to stand." At this point, he turned around suddenly, pointed at the magnificent Buddha statue in the distance, and shouted, "Destroy this demonic dharma!" In the army formation, the murderous aura was soaring to the sky, and the monks in midair, no matter how profound and unpredictable they were, could not help feeling awe-inspiring for a while. Daegzumi temple attacked. Immediately, the densely covered vines on Foshan became extremely tough, like snakes and worms with life. They got into every gap on the Buddha's body and kept tearing. After that, thousands of fiery flames were born from the void, igniting the trees, branches, and vines in the mountains, but in a short time, the raging flames had already turned half of the sky red. Then, countless silver lights flashed from the black clouds rolling in the sky, condensed into streaks of silver snake-like lightning that fell from the sky and slashed directly above Foshan. Countless disasters followed one after another, shrouding the Daegzumi temple. Seeing that the ancient temple was about to be destroyed, accompanied by the sound of the Buddha's trumpet of East Maitreya, the power of the supernatural powers of thousands of attributes combined into a torrent, evolved countless half-empty and half-truth emperors, Shura, Rakshasa, etc. Wait for the statue of the Buddhist Dharma protector to rush towards the cultivators in the air. Among these magical powers, there is a clenched fist that looks inconspicuous and looks like a broken limb. When approaching the cultivator, the fist stretched out abruptly, and stretched to a size of hundreds of feet, revealing the countless tiny rivers, mountains, plains, and cities carried by the palm of his hand, shooting towards the enemy. The giant palm shot in the sky, and it actually gave birth to the power of changing the color of the mountains and rivers. The strong wind it brought up suddenly tore apart the thick dark clouds on the sky, revealing the sky full of stars. It is rare to see such a magnificent sight, even if it is a battle of great supernatural powers, and it makes the faces of hundreds of cultivators in the sky all change color. Some of the unbearable young juniors were even trembling with fear, almost unable to hold the talisman, and fell from the air without knowing the magic formula. The cultivator's battle is actually the same as the mortal's battle. Once the momentum is captured by others, it was originally a situation of bullying the weak, and it is very likely to be defeated. Therefore, watching the giant palm's rampage, one of the cultivators, a fat monk swaying and full of fat, came out more and more. His body grew long against the wind, and instantly transformed into the shape of a giant 30 or 40 feet tall, and threw the rosary in his hand. Turning into thousands of white lotuses, they surrounded the giant palm, and shouted, "This is the Buddha's magical power in the palm of your hand, and those who are not enlightened by Buddhism are not allowed to use it, everyone." Before he finished speaking, the mountains, rivers and the city carried by the giant palm suddenly burst into smoke, instantly turning the white lotus stains into nothingness, and then he looked forward and grabbed the fat monk in his hands. Seeing that as long as he squeezed lightly, the monk would turn into meat sauce, and suddenly accompanied by the chant of Om Mani Padme Hum, hundreds of millions of dazzling golden rays of light appeared in the huge palm, waiting for the rays of light. After dispersing, the Buddha's sound disappeared, and the palm of his hand became empty. The battle is like a chess game, first send troops, then move horses, and finally you can meet and fight together. Whoever starts the game directly uses the general to rampage, stop playing, stop playing. At the same time, a frantic voice suddenly it sounded, and then a golden rainbow lit up in the far west sky and walked away, disappearing instantly. When a cultivator saw this scene, he was shocked at first. After he came to his senses, he couldn't help but blurt out exclaimed, "Has Dharma King Ahan been forced away?" And the cultivators around him were all stunned when they heard this. There was a commotion, and it was obvious that King Agam was an incredible figure. At this moment, the generals on the ground have noticed the fighting skills of their cultivators, and they have already fallen behind. And although he wasn't really of the same mind with those cultivators, he also knew the reason why his lips were cold and his teeth died. When he was in crisis, he hurriedly formed a plan to surround Wei and save Zhao. The roar reached the ears of the thousands of soldiers in a neat array on the hillside along with the strong wind, and the crossbowmen at the forefront of the battle formation immediately loosened their strings, and shot tens of thousands of black arrows with a length of 10,000 feet and the thickness of the thumb with a chain of iron crossbows. The iron-long arrow, drawing an arc, hit Foshan like raindrops, turning the already precarious giant Buddha into riddled with holes. And the gunmen standing behind the crossbowmen ignited the flames in their hands one by one, and pressed the burning flames on the fire door of the tiger cannon. In an instant, with a deafening bang, countless fireballs the size of human heads broke through the rain curtain and landed on the Foshan mountain, which was 1,000 steps away. Collapse slowly. There's no magic circle to protect you. In one fell swoop, the gates of these demon monks were broken, and this battle was half won. Seeing Foshan shattered from a distance, the general's face showed a look of surprise, and a thought flashed in his heart, next, as long as those cultivators can resist the enemy Fang Danange, then he is sure to win. Thinking of this, he subconsciously looked up into the air, and saw that the hundreds of cultivators in the air had spread out, and the giant palm that ran rampant was volleying a tall and burly Taoist priest in a brocade robe in hand. Falun Gong is back, call, call, call. In a desperate situation, the Taoist priest hurriedly drew a talisman in the sky with both hands, and shouted in a hoarse voice. Between the heavens and the earth, a blackened white aura that was summoned burst out of the ground, turned into a square with a length and a width of several tens of meters, with a seal below the upper circle, hitting the giant palm. At the same time, dozens of cultivators in the surrounding area also used their abilities to attack the giant palm. Various techniques, talismans, and treasures appeared in the night sky, and the rain screen reflected the strange and gorgeous colors. It is a pity that the battle of supernatural powers depends on whether the method is mysterious or not, whether the cultivation is profound or not, and it has nothing to do with the number and momentum. It entered the mind of the burly Taoist who was being held. Even though he was in a desperate situation, the burly Taoist priest who still had a violent and stubborn aura between his brows, his angry expression froze, and he became dumbfounded. The summoned seal shrank a lot in an instant due to the owner's change, stagnant in the air, and fell to the ground. At this moment, the giant palm suddenly flipped, pressing down on the burly Taoist priest in the air, suppressing it together with the Feian, and by the way crushed hundreds of elite sergeants on the to death. Junior brother. Looking down at this scene, King Xiu couldn't help but exclaimed in a loud voice, but his tone didn't actually mean much sadness. After you read www.yuyuganshu.com and killed a Taoist powerhouse, that giant the palms also seemed to be too exhausted. From the seemingly real substance, they became much more illusory. They clenched into fists again, lifted off the ground, and pressed their eyebrows with the fingers. Rush away! Good job! Seeing the giant palm attacking him after killing his fellow junior brother, Qing Su shouted angrily, and stretched his left and right sleeves at the same time, using his own Qing Ning thousands of miles of mountains and rivers as the foundation to accumulate Ajiaz's true essence turned into Gang Qi and shot out, slamming into the giant palm. The strength is strong, and one force can break through 10,000 methods, and the law is high. Although these two Qi are not fancy, they are indeed the power of the strongest and the strongest, and they will tear the giant palm apart with one blow. Faded into nothingness with the weather. Seeing this scene, his face was pale, and Qing Su, who had long lost his initial calm temperament, finally felt relieved, but he noticed that when the huge palm shattered, an extremely small thing was held, and it passed by with the wind blowing. The collapsed Dagzumi temple fell towards the end of a stream on the edge of the boundless jungle in the distance. That small thing was a ball with a diameter of no more than half an inch, with clear water inside and a translucent spar shell. By the stream, the skulls of people as thin as skeletons. The man's head received such a heavy blow, but he was numb and motionless as if he was dead, but after a while, there was a faint light on the top of the head in the wind and rain, and the skull was strangely hard as a stone. It became soft as mud, and the bulge and the concave moved constantly. After a cup of tea, the light above the man's head gradually became brighter, and his skull suddenly made a crisp sound. A black dragon shaped like an earthworm, and a white elephant only the size of a baby's thumb. From an instant the extinguished light jumped out.